The audience had no idea. The cameras had no idea. Not even Emma Watson could have predicted what would unfold in the next 25 minutes. She had done this 100 times before, walked onto brightly lit stages, smiled for the cameras, exchanged polite laughs with late-night hosts. Tonight was supposed to be no different. Another promotional stop on the long road of press tours for her new film. But the moment she stepped onto Jimmy Kimmel's stage, something felt off. The applause roared. Emma looked radiant in her tailored navy blazer, her presence commanding yet composed. She waved, smiled, sat down, crossed her legs, and waited. "Emma Watson, everybody!" Jimmy grinned, clapping. The audience joined in. He leaned forward, beaming. "Thank you so much for being here tonight." "Thank you for having me, Jimmy," she said calmly, her voice as poised as ever. And yet beneath that polished exterior, there was a flicker, just a flicker, of unease. And then it began. "You've been pretty quiet lately about your personal life," Jimmy started with a smirk. "The fans are dying to know. Are you seeing anyone special?" Emma's smile didn't falter. Not exactly, but it changed, tensed, calculated. I prefer to keep my private line private," she said evenly. "I'm here to talk about my new film project." Jimmy didn't budge. "Oh, come on," he chuckled, gesturing to the audience. "You can't just leave us hanging like that. Don't you all want to know?" The audience cheered weakly, more out of reflex than excitement. Emma shifted slightly in her seat. "I really think my work speaks for itself, and that's what I'd rather focus on tonight." But Jimmy didn't back down, and that was the first crack in the polished veneer of this evening. "You've always been so serious," he said. "All that UN women stuff, the activism. Don't you ever just want to be a normal 20-something? "I think using my platform for important causes is fun," Emma replied, her British accent sharpening. "And I'm in my 30s now, Jimmy." That line should have ended it. It should have made him pivot, move on, show some grace. But it didn't. Instead, he leaned in. "Well," Jimmy said, waving off her correction, "some of your speeches, don't take this the wrong way, can come off a little, preachy. Do you ever worry that people just tune out when celebrities start lecturing them about politics?" The air in the studio shifted. The audience stopped clapping. Emma's back straightened just slightly. "I don't consider advocating for gender equality to be preachy," she said, voice cool but firmer. "I think it's necessary." The temperature dropped again when Jimmy smiled, a hollow, calculated grin. "Right, right. But let's be real. People fell in love with you as Hermione, looking good in those Hogwarts robes, not making political speeches." Emma's face didn't change, but something inside her did. Still, she didn't raise her voice. "What made me famous was my acting," she said, "and I use my platform to bring attention to causes I believe in. That should be celebrated, not criticized." Jimmy laughed, a strange metallic laugh that didn't fit the moment. "Sure, sure, but come on, be honest. Don't you ever miss being the girl who played Hermione before all the opinions?" And then there it was, the flash of something dangerous in Emma's eyes. "Having opinions isn't something I have to do, Jimmy," she said slowly. "It's something I choose to do because I care." Jimmy leaned back, arms crossed smugly. "That's noble of you. But come on, how much difference can an actress really make? You're not a politician. You're not a scientist. You just pretend to be other people for a living." The room turned ice cold. Behind the cameras, even the crew had frozen. And still, Emma didn't rise. Yet. Instead, she clasped her hands in her lap, knuckles pale. "My job is acting. Yes, but that doesn't mean I can't speak about the world I live in." Jimmy smirked. "Sure, but what world is that, Emma? You've been rich and famous since you were a kid. What real-world experience do you have?" Emma blinked, once. "I think we should move on to talking about my film." Jimmy ignored her. "You come on these shows, give these interviews, and you've always got this perfect, rehearsed answer. Don't you ever just want to admit you might not know what you're talking about?" That was the moment the audience stopped breathing. And that's when Emma finally looked him dead in the eye. "I know exactly what I'm talking about," she said, voice soft as glass. "And your questions say more about you than they do about me." The crowd didn't know whether to gasp or applaud. Jimmy leaned forward again, trying to maintain dominance. Oh, now we're getting them where? What do my questions say about me, Emma? She smiled, but it wasn't kind. They say you're uncomfortable with women who have opinions. They say you think a woman's value comes from being quiet and pretty. Silence. Total suffocating silence. Jimmy tried to laugh it off, but the laugh cracked in his throat. And for the first time in his career, Jimmy Kimmel didn't know what to say. For a heartbeat, the studio hung in suspended animation. Jimmy's smirk had evaporated. The usual bounce in his voice was gone, replaced by a brittle edge of defensiveness. He tried to shift gears, but the clutch had snapped. The show, once tightly choreographed, was now veering wildly off script. Wow, Jimmy said, voice thinner now, less sure. That's quite an accusation. I just think maybe you take yourself a little too seriously sometimes. Emma tilted her head. There was no anger in her face now, just precision. And maybe, Jimmy, she replied, you don't take women seriously enough. The blow landed, not physically, but visibly. Jimmy blinked, thrown off balance. He laughed again, too loud, too forced. Oh, so now I'm the villain, he said, waving to the audience, like they were in on some great misunderstood joke. I'm just asking the questions people want answered. Emma leaned forward slightly, her voice calm but firm. Your job is to talk to your guests about their work, not to belittle them, not to question is your right to speak. Jimmy scoffed, gesturing dramatically to the crowd. Apparently, asking follow-up questions is now considered belittling. Who knew? This time no one laughed, not even a courtesy chuckle. Emma turned in her seat to face him fully, her tone sharpened just enough to cut. You're not asking follow-ups. You're making assumptions about my intelligence, about my experience, about my right to care, and that's not the same thing. Jimmy leaned back, now visibly sweating. Look, I get it. You went to fancy schools. You've got your degrees. You think you're smarter than everyone else. But at the end of the day, Emma, you're still just an actress who got lucky. The air cracked. A soundless gasp rippled through the crowd. On camera, Emma sat frozen. Her eyes narrowed slightly. She didn't flinch, but the fire in her gaze was unmistakable. Excuse me? She asked, her voice dangerously low. Jimmy, unaware he'd stepped into the lion's den, doubled down. Come on, without Harry Potter, where would you be? Do you think you'd be sitting here preaching about feminism if you hadn't landed that casting call? The silence was deafening. Even the hum of the studio lights seemed to fade into nothing. Emma didn't speak right away. Her eyes locked on Jimmy's. She looked at him not as an interviewer, but as a case study. When she finally spoke, her voice was razor sharp. You're right about one thing, she said. I was given an incredible opportunity with Harry Potter. But what I did with that opportunity, the education I pursued, the work I chose, the voice I developed, that wasn't luck. That was mine. Jimmy rolled his eyes. Sure, all that work, writing speeches other people wrote for you. Emma's composure broke for the first time. You think I don't write my own speeches? Her voice spiked. You think I just read a teleprompter and smile? Jimmy held up his hands in mock surrender. Hey, relax, I'm just saying. Must be nice having a team do all the hard stuff. Emma's chair scraped back suddenly as she stood. It wasn't dramatic. It was deliberate, controlled, but powerful. Gasps echoed around the studio. Jimmy blinked up at her, now clearly realizing he was not in control. Do you even know what the hard stuff is, Jimmy? She asked, her voice rising with each word. The hard stuff is being told to smile while men talk over you. The hard stuff is receiving death threats for using your platform. The hard stuff is sitting here, right now, while you systematically try to dismantle my credibility in front of millions. Jimmy paled, but his pride held tight. Oh, come on, Emma. You're being dramatic. This is just a conversation. Emma laughed. It was bitter, hollow. In the last 10 minutes, she said, counting on her fingers, you've mocked my activism, questioned my education, dismissed my experience, and implied that any success I have is due to luck. If that's your definition of a conversation, Jimmy, I'd hate to see what you call an attack. The audience was riveted. You could feel it, not just see it. Something seismic was happening. and they knew it. Jimmy cleared his throat, sweat now visible under the lights. Okay, maybe we got off on the wrong foot. Let's just start over. Tell me about the movie. Emma stared down at him. Her silence was a statement. You want to start over now, she asked? Now that the audience has seen you for what you really are? When I tried to shift the conversation earlier, you ignored me. You chose this path. And now you want to reset? The silence from the audience wasn't discomfort anymore. It was awe. Jimmy's voice wavered. Just, please sit back down. Emma took a breath. Her tone changed, less furious, more resolved. What I wanted, Jimmy, was a conversation built on mutual respect. What I got was a reminder of everything women still have to fight against on a daily basis. And then she dropped the final blade. You've spent this entire interview trying to put me in a box. The pretty girl box. The lucky girl box. The stay in your lane box. And now you're upset that I won't fit. Jimmy looked like a man drowning in front of a live audience. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. And just when it seemed like Emma had finished, she took one slow step forward and said something the world would be quoting for days. Do you know what your questions really reveal, Jimmy? He blinked, lips parted. They reveal that you're not afraid of women who are loud. You're afraid of women who are right. The crowd didn't cheer. They didn't need to. They just stared, silent, stunned, breathless. Because they knew this wasn't the end. This was only the middle. Jimmy Kimmel sat frozen, not because he didn't want to speak, because for once, he simply couldn't. His words, so often weapons of mockery or charm, had turned to dust in his mouth. The confident, late-night host, the man who had skewered presidents and movie stars with equal ease, now stared up at Emma Watson like a schoolboy who'd just been publicly scolded, and deserved it. Emma stood tall, centered under the unforgiving lights, unwavering. He tried one last feeble reach. I guess we know how you really feel. Emma tilted her head, and for a fleeting second, her voice softened. Not with kindness, but with disappointment. This isn't about how I feel, Jimmy. This is about how you behaved. And the tragic part, you still don't see it. He blinked rapidly, clearly rattled now. I mean, if I crossed a line, I didn't realize. That's the problem, she cut in. You didn't realize. Because you've spent your entire career being allowed to cross those lines without consequence. Her voice, still calm, carried more weight than shouting ever could. You're not used to pushback. You're used to women smiling through discomfort, laughing off disrespect, shrinking themselves to fit your comfort zone. Jimmy shifted uncomfortably in his chair. I've had plenty of strong women on this show. Emma didn't move. Strong women who played along, she said. Strong women who knew that calling you out meant being labeled difficult. Strong women who bit their tongues for the sake of their careers. And you took their silence as permission. Jimmy opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again, but nothing came. Emma leaned slightly forward, her gaze locked to his like a moral mirror. Tell me something, she said. When was the last time you asked a male guest if he missed being young and pretty? When was the last time you implied a man's career was just luck? When was the last time you mocked a man for being passionate about something that mattered? Jimmy didn't answer. He didn't need to. The silence said enough. Emma turned her attention toward the camera, not just breaking the fourth wall, but obliterating it. To every woman watching right now, whether you're at home or in a boardroom or in a classroom, how many times have you been told you're too much, too passionate, too outspoken, too political, too emotional? She paused, the moment tightened. And how many times have you swallowed your words, bit your lip, smiled to keep the peace? Her eyes scanned the room. I've done it too, more times than I can count, but not tonight. Jimmy looked at her, small beneath the weight of what he'd unleashed. Emma, no, she interrupted, this time her voice sharp again. You don't get to sincerely apologize after 20 minutes of mockery. You don't get to play the victim because your own audience doesn't laugh with you anymore. You're not sorry for what you said. You're sorry that it backfired. She turned to the audience. I came here tonight to talk about my work, my art. But instead, I had to defend my right to exist as something more than a talking prop in your script. She moved toward the desk, slowly unclipping her microphone. You don't want women to be real, Jimmy, she said. You want them rehearsed, charming, grateful, manageable. The studio was so quiet that the clicking of her mic felt like thunder. Jimmy watched her, pale, speechless. His hands trembled just slightly on the desk. Emma held her mic in one hand, looked at him one last time. You wanted a performance tonight, Jimmy. Well, I gave you something better. She turned to the camera. I gave you the truth. And with that, she placed the mic gently on the edge of the desk, turned on her heel, and walked off the stage. Not a word, not a wave, no dramatics, just silence, authority, finality. The audience didn't know whether to applaud, cry, or simply absorb what they'd witnessed. Some sat with their mouths slightly open. Others exchanged glances that said, did that just happen? Jimmy remained at his desk motionless. His team behind the scenes didn't know whether to cut to commercial or leave the cameras rolling. The latter won. Because this wasn't just television. It was transformation. He stared at the empty chair across from him. The air still pulsed with the weight of her words. The stage, once his domain, now felt unfamiliar, like a kingdom overthrown. He reached toward his mug, then stopped. There was nothing left to drink. What would you have done in Emma's position? Comment below. And don't forget to subscribe to Eco Stories for more powerful moments just like this.